The rain came down in a belligerent nocturnal torrent. Drowned was the moon within the sky, and I sat at my lamplit desk, nipping at a White Russian and trying to piece together where the last 7 years had gone. There was a knock at the door. Who the hell could it be at this hour and this kind of weather? What is it? I asked the soaking silhouette in the doorway.
Please, I know neither where nor when I am, only that I need a towel and a drink.
I had both and told him to enter. Drying off with drink in hand, the man said,
Thank you for your hospitality. Please, carry on with your business as though I am not here.
Several minutes after I had resumed watching Jerma's Frog Detective 2 stream, I paused it and turned to the man sitting in the corner. What's your name? I asked him.
Paul.
Paul who?
Paul Michel.
Paul Michel. You got 2 first names?
What?
I mean, you got a family name or something?
Foucault.
French, eh?
Oui.
Let me ask you something. What the hell were you doing out there in the rain at this time of night?
Alas, I cannot say. I only recall preparing for my upcoming lecture, Des Espaces Autres, the other spaces, and, following a lapse in my consciousness, arriving here in this terrible storm before your doorstep.
Lecture, huh? What on?
On the sanctity of human spaces and the heterotopia.
Heterotopia, what? Like a paradise for straight people?
No. In contrast to a utopia which does not exist, a heterotopia is a place which is absolutely different from all other places in reality. Now, please, let me rest. I am tired.
He slumped down on the staircase and appeared to sleep. I went back to watching Frog Detective unravel the mystery of the haunted woods. Some time later, Foucault arose and walked over to my desk.
What are these peculiar images of animals masquerading around as humans?
The frog is a crime detective, I explained, and the animals reside in an arboreal community plagued by the omen of an invisible wizard. They have enlisted the investigative expertise of the frog to solve their mystery.
Whence come these strange voices of the animals?
The detective and his compatriots exist within a virtual simulation. A game, I said. And the man playing the game has recorded himself doing so, and supplied charming little voices to each of these animal characters for the entertainment of millions.
You mean to say that millions of people partake in the viewing of this man and his game playing for entertainment? Who is this man? He must captivate the world with his act.
In an indirect sort of way, yes. But the game is not his. It is available to anyone with a machine of the variety in which we are presently viewing the man give his peculiar little performance.
Why then would millions partake in this second-hand viewing of the so-called game when they themselves could enjoy it on their own?
Ah, I said, to answer that, we must continue watching this man and his voices. We finished the Frog Detective 2 stream.
Forgive me, your drink and Detective Frog have left me exhausted and confused. Might I sleep here for the night?
I gave him my bed, slept on the floor. We awoke the following afternoon. The rain continued fiercely.
The events of last night continued to perplex me. This man who plays the detective frog game. You said his strange act reaches millions on this peculiar device television of yours.
Foucault said, pacing. Millions seek him out on their own on such devices, yes. He is what they call a streamer. He releases streams of such content to the public, who consume it for entertainment. I proceeded to divulge to him the nature of the live stream, its resemblance to television, but also the idiosyncrasies of internet content creation, of Twitch chat, of stream VODs and edits, and of Jerma. Foucault still seemed to struggle to fully understand everything.
I wish to understand this phenomenon of live streaming. What other acts of Jeremy Elbertson can you show to me which parallel in their disposition that of the detective frog?
Next, we watched the Slime Rancher stream. A couple House Flipper streams followed. The idea of pretending to renovate a non-existent house confused him at first, but for someone apparently unacquainted with video games, he caught on surprisingly quickly. Foucault's appetite for Jerma became insatiable. By evening, we were into the Insaniquarium stream. Foucault had liked Jerma's bit about power and money over the preciousness of life. And then came the Stardew Valley streams. Foucault had little interest in farming, so the next day we were at it again, this time with Pythonox Dark Souls 3 edit. He really seemed to enjoy Dark Souls 3. I think the violence did it for him. After 4 or 5 days straight of this, I realized Foucault wasn't watching Jerma just to be entertained. He was observing, studying, analyzing a phenomenon he had evidently never before encountered or even conceived of. Then it came one night after we had just finished Guy's last Super Mario RPG long edit. Something clicked for Foucault.
I found it!
Found what?
My heterotopia! It is here! It is this man, this Jeremy Elbertson!
What do you mean?
These streams, as you call them, which we have watched, all possess a common element of coziness, no?
Yes, I suppose they do.
Precisely, and yet the streams of Jeremy Elbertson retain this element of coziness even while juxtaposing many different simulations, your so-called games, of an incredible variety of dispositions. Indeed, we live in an epoch of simultaneity, of the near and the far, of the side by side, of the dispersed.
I wasn't following, but I followed him out of the room.
Before I arrived here, I was preparing my lecture on heterotopias, on spaces distinct from all other spaces in human existence. This Jeremy Elbertson character has proven that such a space, such a heterotopia can exist on even a non-physical plane, can manifest in a space which is both real and yet beyond reality.
You're saying Jerma streams represent their own kind of heterotopia?
Precisely, but more specifically, that the so-called cozy streams of Jerma best embody my concept.
How do you figure that?
I have developed a systematic description of the heterotopia, which is characterized by 6 principles. If you do not mind, I wish to elucidate the relation between each principle and its corresponding manifestation in the so-called cozy streams of Jeremy Elbertson.
Please, go ahead, I said.
Its first principle is that there is probably not a single culture in the world that fails to constitute heterotopias. I now realize this principle pertains not only to physical social cultures, but also to digital cultures, and to the so-called streamer culture no less.
So they're ubiquitous.
Yes, but there is perhaps no one absolutely universal form of heterotopia to be found. We can, however, classify them in two main categories: heterotopies of crisis and heterotopias of deviation. Most fascinating to me is that the cozy streams of Jeremy Elbertson fulfill the stipulations of both categories.
How does he manage that?
Do you recall the stream titled Talking for 2 Hours, to which we listened a few nights ago upon imbibing an excessive quantity of alcohol and feeling unpleasantly ill?
No, but yes.
Consider the heterotopia of crisis is reserved for those individuals who are in a state of crisis, as we temporarily were that night. Consider also that this Talking for 2 Hours stream of Jeremy Elbertson represented for us a pleasant diversion, and elsewhere to which we were transported to escape our crisis.
I nodded.
There exist, of course, crises which exceed in severity our temporary alcohol-induced dyspepsia. Psychological ailments, depression, anxiety, significant chronic diseases of the body, or the general directional confusion plaguing the adolescent mind. Pressing crises indeed. And yet, the mere unanswered conversation of this Jerma is enough to assuage or distract from these predicaments, to transport one listening from their crisis to an elsewhere of comfort and calm.
He certainly has that effect.
Yes. What is more, in our society where continual, unabated, unceasing, unquestioned activity in the form of one's occupation, one's role in their social framework, one's social and moral obligations to their peers and to the world as a whole. In our society where these things are the rule, idleness is a sort of deviation. Yet it is idleness which is cozy streams of Jerma cultivate, and in so doing, they constitute a heterotopia of deviation.
A necessary one, it seems.
Perhaps so, but therein lies the connection to the second principle of the heterotopia. Each one has a precise and determined function, according to the synchrony of the culture in which it occurs.
Meaning
That the cozy streams of Jeremy Elbertson satisfy the second heterotopian principle in the discrete functions these streams have to both the broader culture of the whole population of Jerma followers and to the subcultures which arise within this population.
entertainment, I assume, but what other functions do you suppose they perform beyond that?
Entertainment, yes, but I have also observed in the, comments appended to the stream recordings that there exist classes of Jerma followers who extract somnolent value from said recordings, who employ them as sleep aids. Classes who employ these recordings with their less substantive visual component as so-called background noise to accompany other activities such as study or recreation. and classes who employ these recordings as intentional periodic diversions from studies or recreational activities. In short, the Jerma cozy stream possesses clear functions independent of their original intent of pure entertainment, and wholly dependent on the subcultures of stream viewers which engage with them.
Jerma does attract quite a variety of people, doesn't he?
Well, yes, he does. Doctors, lawyers, scientists, accomplished persons of many degrees, as we have seen. This is to be expected, however, in accordance with the third principle. The heterotopia is capable of juxtaposing in a single real place several spaces, several sites that are in themselves incompatible.
But a Twitch stream is no real place.
But reality is understood in terms of engagement and meaning, facilitated by the sensorial faculties of the body. Thus is your Twitch stream as real a place as any, for the body is a basis for any type of experience of and engagement with objects, either physical or digital, wherein may occur a valid heterotopia.
Alright, I'll grant you that. But then, how the hell the Jerma streams juxtapose several incompatible sites?
Think not of a site as a physical location, but as a theoretical point on a grid of many intersections. Now, consider the whole of all possible games and stream activities as comprising the total set of all points on the grid. In one single stream, I believe it was the 700,000 games stream, or perhaps also one of the green screen cinema nights, this Jeremy Elbertson brought onto the singular place of the stage of his stream the myriad incompatible sites of differing, contrasting games or films in a juxtaposition that, without the unifying link of Jerma himself, would not have existed. Thus it is that the sitter brings onto the rectangle of the stage, one after the other, a whole series of places that are foreign to one another. Thus it is that the Jerma cozy stream, when allowed to relax and release its goal of accomplishing a specific objective, may conjoin contradictory game or movie experiences into one great heterotopian entity.
A veritable garden of content, you might say.
Yes, a garden. For all the vegetation of a garden is supposed to come together in the space of its walls in a sort of microcosm, just as all the content of a Jerma cozy stream comes together in a microcosm of its own.
Listen, Paul.
Please, call me Michel.
Look, Michel, we've been at this for a fucking week. Don't you think this is enough time to spend on Jerma for a while?
Time. We have come to the fourth principle. Per the fourth principle, heterotopias are most often linked to slices in time, which is to say that they open onto what might be termed, for the sake of symmetry, heterochronies. The heterotopia begins to function at full capacity when one arrives at a sort of absolute break with their traditional time.
Like now?
Yes, like now. We are no longer carried along the standard timeline of our quotidian engagements. Instead, we spend our present hours of discussion in a sort of Jerma limbo. Thus do we currently reside in the very Jerma heterotopia of which I speak.
So the fourth principle is limbo?
No. The first principle refers to the temporality of heterotopic existence as separate from that of standard reality. There are heterotopias which accumulate time, museums and libraries for example, and heterotopias which are linked to time in its most fleeting, transitory, precious aspect, to time in the mode of the festival.
Or to the live stream.
Yes, linked to the temporality of the so-called live stream as well. For there are those who take time out of their lives to accommodate the live viewing of the Jerma stream whenever Jeremy Elbertson happens to schedule it. Just as there is an accumulation of time in the form of archived Jerma streams, hours upon hours of them, for viewing in a temporal heterotopia entirely distinct from that of the live viewing.
This seems like a principle of all Jerma streams, not just the cozy ones.
Oh, but of course, every Jeremy Elbertson stream, viewed live or after the fact, occurs in its own temporally separate heterotopia. But, by contrast to the general stream, the idea of establishing a sort of archive purely of stillness, the will to enclose in one place all times, all epochs, all forms, all tastes, the idea of constituting a place of all times that is itself outside of time and inaccessible to its ravages, inaccessible to the ravages of stress, age, and obligation, the project of organizing in this way a sort of perpetual and indefinite accumulation of time in an immobile place, a calm and relaxing immobile place. This whole idea belongs to our Jerma cozy stream, uniquely.
So specifically, the Jerma cozy stream protects us from the passage of time in our own lives.
Quite so. It draws us into an immobile present, in which we perceive a passage of time entirely antithetical to the conventional turbulent flow that underpins our quickly shifting daily lives. The calmness of the Jerma cozy stream manifests an undeniable heterochrony which invests said stream with its very calming aspect.
A sort of temporal isolation, then.
You could say that, yes. Moreover, in accordance with the fit principle, heterotopias always presuppose a system of opening and closing that both isolates them, not only temporally but also spatially, and makes them at the same time penetrable. In general, the heterotopic site is not freely accessible like a public place. Either the entry is compulsory, or else the individual has to submit to rites and purifications. To get in, one must have a certain permission and make certain gestures.
You mean to say they must submit to the rules of the stream, and the rites and gestures are those the emotes, the chat, and the comments?
To an extent, yes. But do you recall at our first meeting when you informed me that this Jeremy Elbertson was viewed by millions?
Well, he has accrued many millions of views across all the channels of Jerma content over time, but generally his concurrent viewership number is in the several thousands.
Yes, I have done some research of my own to this end. His popularity is appreciable, but does not represent the pinnacle thereof among those of his profession. No?
That's right, he is still somewhat a niche streamer.
Precisely. You see, the promise of a cozy experience beckons where a decrease of scale in the surrounding physical environment. This is known as the descending enclosure concept. One enters into a Jerma stream, cozy or not, knowing that they are engaging with a more tightly knit and compact community of fellow viewers. Thus are they entering an isolated heterotopic environment in this respect. The isolation deriving from the relative size and uniformity of purpose of the viewing audience. Yet the audience of Jeremy Elbertson's viewership also remains penetrable, permeable. For, as I have researched, his audience has grown considerably over the course of the chronological span of his streaming profession, encompassing a broadening diversity of persons and personalities. Therefore, the heterotopia of the Jerma cozy stream is both closed, isolated in its parochiality, and permeable in the evidently widening scope of its audience.
But that seems to be a tenet of Jerma streams in general. It doesn't just include the cozy streams.
Here we must invoke our final principle. The last trait of heterotopias is that they have a function in relation to all the space that remains. This remaining space comprises not only all other occupations beyond streaming, nor does it even conclude in encompassing all other streaming personalities. Indeed, the remaining space further includes all other streams of Jeremy Elbertson himself, which do not fall under the classification of the Jerma cozy stream. Thus, the function of the latter, by definition of the heterotopia, must enable a critical reflection upon all of the former. In other words, the Jerma cozy stream must, in its heterotopic role, enable one engaged therein to reflect upon the surrounding world from within the cozy stream's heterotopic boundaries.
Alright, now you've lost me.
Not yet, mon ami. We are almost through. Let us return to that stream titled Talking for 2 Hours, with which we began our discussion. It is a stream of comfort for many, undoubtedly, but also it is a vehicle for reflection. You see, the viewers who engage with it, who found themselves in crises and voiced their pains, their struggles, did they not, in so doing, reflect upon the circumstances beyond the stream which had brought them to their present stations in life?
Yeah? Jobs, family troubles, no idea what the hell to do with their lives. The usual shit. I went to that stream for the first time dealing with those kinds of things myself.
Indeed, indeed. And did you not, by virtue of having entered the heterotopic space of the cozy Jerma stream, find yourself enabled to reflect upon the circumstances and goings on beyond that space, which specifically led you to draw the distinction between the two realms of experience, the outside world of strife and the inner world of the stream?
Well, yeah. Jerma's encouragements did get me thinking about my situation in life.
There you have it! Imagine, monsieur, that the cozy stream of Jeremy Elbertson is a boat gliding upon the endless sea of life. The boat is a floating piece of space, a place without a place that exists by itself, that is closed in on itself and at the same time is given over to the infinity of the sea, and that from part to part, from tack to tack, from circumstance to unpleasant circumstance, it goes as far as the remotest islands of experience in search of the most precious treasures they conceal in their gardens. These treasures being the peace, the calm, and comfort for which we seething, starving all do pine in the course of our unconsolable lives. The seafaring ship, the Jerma cozy stream, is the heterotopia par excellence. It is the greatest reserve of the imagination, for it allows the imagination to, at once unencumbered by the oppressive shores of life, both rest and soar. The Jerma cozy stream exemplifies the heterotopic concept, for it, in all its pleasant and secluded otherness, allows us to simultaneously escape and confront life on our own terms, all the while supplemented by the positivity and encouragement of a man whose mind we cannot begin to fathom. Like a world without ships, a civilization without Jeremy Elbertson's cozy streams is one in which dreams dry up. Espionage takes the place of adventure, police takes the place of pirates, and we drown in the sea, devoid of the hope or promise of better shores.
I sat for a moment in wide-eyed silence at this man who now stood up before me, breathing heavily and smiling with a sense of renewed purpose.
I must now be going, for I have a lecture to present. I thank you deeply for your hospitality and attentive ear, mon ami. Au revoir.
The rain, all these days later, had still not subsided. "Don't you want to wait until the rain stops?" I asked from the doorway. The man shook his head, turned, and ventured back out into the storm whence he came. I was not very sure that he knew where he was going. After all, he didn't really seem to be from this place, or this time for that matter. Perhaps he existed in a heterotopia of his own. Nevertheless, his steps carried him deeper and deeper into the tempest, by which he was eventually completely swallowed and vanished. Unsure of what to make of the whole thing, I went inside and returned to my desk. A familiar image appeared on my computer screen, the thumbnail for Jerma's long drive stream. I sat down and clicked on it.
Dude, I can't even see. I can't see the road. Is there a road? No. Oh, okay, but this is the road. Okay, is like this ultra blue effect or what? Where do I have to go? How do I turn?
Almost you, almost me, almost blue.